Welcome, everyone. I am so excited about today's interview because today I have two co-creators of an ongoing documentary initiative called Citizen Power, which is a follow-up to the 2018 PBS documentary American Creed. Citizen Power explores American idealism and activism from a range of young adult perspectives. And today I have with me Jonathan Blair and Sam Schimmel, who are both young rural leaders doing the important work of tending to the heartbeat of their local communities in really expansive and thoughtful and unique ways. Jonathan Blair joins us from Pippa Passes in Appalachia, Kentucky, where he's focused on providing pathways to educational leadership for mountain people, including children of coal miners. Sam Schimmel is part of the Kenichi tribe in Kenai, Alaska, and the tribe's movement to restore indigenous rights to subsistence fishing and economic development in ways that are in alignment with community values. There's a third co-creator of this initiative as well, Jace Charger. Unfortunately, Jace couldn't join us today due to those pesky rural broadband issues that we're all familiar with, but I wanted to introduce Jace anyway. They are the co-founder of the very first protest camp at Standing Rock, and continue the work of protecting land and water through resistance, civil disobedience, and intergenerational solidarity on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation in South Dakota. Jonathan, Jace, and Sam have documented their efforts recently through photographic essays with support from Working Assumptions, which is a program that engages young people in the intersections of work, family, and care in their own lives. And I'm so excited that all three of these folks are going to share their photography with audiences on January 19th through the Connecting Our Heartlands virtual event, which is co-produced by the Rural Assembly and will feature these three in conversation with leading civic scholars Danielle Allen, Eric Liu, and David Kennedy. So that's what we can expect today. We're going to have a conversation with Sam and Jonathan. We'll miss Jace, but we'll catch up with Jace again soon. But I want to talk to Sam and Jonathan about what it is that they carry with them, their inspirations, their fears, their hopes for the future of their communities. And I want to give you a slight preview into what you can expect at the January 19th event. I'm really eager to kickstart this conversation by giving folks a better sense of where you live, where you come from, and what it is that fuels your fire. So I wanted to go around the horn and just ask you to give a brief introduction of yourself and tell us something that you would like us to know about where you come from. What is important to you? What is most important to you, perhaps, about your community? Sam, do you mind kicking us off?
I absolutely can. And once again, yeah, thank you for having us on today. Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Schimmel. I'm Kenichi and Siberian Yupik from Kenai, Alaska. I'm the founder of Operation Fish Drop and current law student at Georgetown. Really, what sets my home apart from other places is the connection to our food. You know, you go into any house, you go into any community center, and you see exactly where your food comes from. It's not isolated. It doesn't come in a package. It doesn't come from a grocery store. It comes directly from the ocean. It comes directly from our rivers and from our land. And so I think that is really what sets our community apart, because it forces you to have a deeper understanding of the environment around you. It forces us to rely on our traditions and our culture in order to be able to feed our families and to survive. And so I think that's what really is special about our place.
Thank you so much. Jonathan, how about you?
Thank you, Whitney. It's great to be here. My name is Jonathan Blair. I currently go to college, Dallas Lloyd College in Appalachian, Kentucky, Pippa Passes, in which I study social studies education. And the interesting thing about my college and my community are essentially the same thing, so I'm just going to kind of delve into that. We offer a compulsory work study program here in which each student works alongside their education, which teaches many important values such as time management. And this is a really great way to move the Appalachian people forward into education, because everyone has such strong blue collar roots with coal mining and everything else, that originated in these hills, and now they can apply that and transition that to acquiring a higher education. So that's my mission, is to further educate the people of this region in order to further the region itself.
Thank you for that. And all of you all I know have been working over the past year, in fact, on the Citizen Power project alongside Citizen Film, and then you've also been doing in tandem with that a photographic essay that brings another dimension, I think, to the stories you all were sharing. All three of you shared about what's important to you about your communities. And I was wondering today, especially as I was looking at Sam Schimmel's photographic essay, which is already up on the Daily Yonder, looking at those pictures that you've taken of the work and the life that's happening in your community. I wonder if looking through the camera lens keyed you into something new or different, or illuminated something for you that you hadn't really taken in before you had that camera in your hand.
Kind of the photo taking journey that I've been on started with Operation Fish Drop, and that was a food security program that um, was really aimed at ensuring Alaska Native elders and families had access to subsistence food. You saw during the pandemic people getting cut off from those subsistence food networks, people not being able to leave, people not being able to go home, and people not being able to fish. Uh, Compound those restrictions with poor salmon returns, and you saw that people's freezers were empty. And so during that project, we were able to get about 25,000 pounds of salmon together and give that out to community members. And it was really important to be able to document it, mainly because it was funded by grant money and you have to have grant reporting. And people always want to see pictures. And so it was something that I struggled with at first, figuring out how you take a photo that embodies the feeling of our community when we have our traditional food. How do you demonstrate and capture that in a way that's positively reflective of our community, that puts forward the message that we want put forward, and that doesn't leave room for interpretation. It's very explicit. You know, I come from a marine mammal hunting community, and we're often painted in a poor light because of it. And so, whenever we take pictures of our subsistence, whenever we take pictures of our community eating together, you have to be very careful about how you do it. I'm working with Citizen Film to document what was going on down in the Kenai and with my community down there. It was just a continuation of that, but it was also facing inward as well. The project that we put together, we want to make a movie out of it, because one of our elders shows us how to smoke salmon in the traditional way during it. And as we launch into this next year, we have our school open for the first time, our tribal school, one of the first tribal schools in Alaska, opened. And we want to start integrating that cultural education component um, into our school. And so for a long time, I really thought of photographers as quite annoying people who are shoving cameras in everybody's faces. Um, and was always somebody doing, not taking pictures, not sitting back. And so it was definitely an adjustment to step back, and then also a greater realization of kind of the role that good photography can play. Just because a lot of times it doesn't play the best one for our indigenous communities. You see things like what do they call that? Uh, Grief tourism, or whatever it is, trauma dumping, or not trauma dump, trauma porn. Um, and our native communities, photographers capitalizing on the situation that our communities are in order to further their own career and their own standing. And so when you have a native person behind the camera, that doesn't happen. You're portraying that story of strength, that story of tradition, that story of resilience that is core to our community. And it really is, I think, helpful. So it's definitely been super interesting.
Sam, is there a photo in particular, because yours is already published, your photo essay, is there a photo in particular that stands out to you that you could describe to us that kind of captures that authenticity and that moment?
I think that there's one of the ones that stands out in my memory is one where you see my two aunts holding a piece of salmon, and my Aunt Marianne is wrapping cotton twine around it for it to be hung my aunt Ronette is feeling which way the scales go to ensure that it's correct. And I think what that picture symbolizes is not so much just two women in a kitchen making salmon, but the transition of knowledge from elders to younger people. For a long time, our traditions have been kind of, they short circuited our parents' generation. They short circuited our parents' generation in that their parents didn't teach them, but my grandparents did teach us, my generation. And so there's kind of this lost generation that was born between the 1960s and the 1980s, where it wasn't a good thing to be Native. Uh, you know, I think for our indigenous communities, there was a long time. There's a lot of stigma around being indigenous, but I think that we've come past that. Really to the point where you know we used to be ashamed to be Native, but now there's people pretending to be us. Um, and really, what that photo symbolizes is that transition of knowledge to that lost generation. Something that's super important. And so I think that's really the one that stands out in my mind.
That's beautiful. Jonathan, what about you? What's it been like to be behind the camera in the story you're trying to tell?
Being from a region that very often gets painted in a negative light definitely makes it different to, try to portray that story. But when it's an Appalachian holding the camera in Appalachia, that is a completely different story, because so many people have come into the region and made hillbillyologies, or whatever you want to call it, just painting the people as cynical and stupid, when in reality it couldn't be further from that. But the one thing that being on that side of the camera really proved to me is that, pictures are a universal language. That's something that anyone in the world can look at and somewhat understand, given a little context. And to be able to show a region that very, very seldom gets portrayed in a positive light in terms of a worldview, it just felt very powerful to be able to do that and to show that, there is a large movement here to further the area and to further the education of the people in this area.
That's wonderful. We'll be right back after this from the Daily Yonder.
Hi, I'm Xander Brown with the Daily Yonder. Check out the Yonder Report, a weekly podcast rounding up the latest rural news. Produced by the Daily Yonder and Public News Service, you can listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And now, back to Everywhere Radio. I wanted to ask Jonathan if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about how you and your community have been coping since the major flood that hit eastern Kentucky in 2022. And right before we started this podcast, we were all talking about FEMA and the frustrations around getting the right aid to the people who need it. But I wonder how things have been in your community and your region.
Yeah, the flood was absolutely devastating. It came overnight, something completely unexpected. It was not even necessarily really forecasted in the weather. The rain clouds just sort of parked themselves here and stayed for a while. And there was absolute total devastation all around my community. However, thankfully, right here in Pippa-Passes, the campus / the town itself, there wasn't so much damage. We just had minimal damage to one building. A lot of creek banks eroded, and thankfully, no lives lost. But, 10 minutes away in any direction, there was absolute total devastation. But thankfully, Eastern Kentucky, Appalachia as a whole, and a lot of people from all around the country were able to, pull together and do what we could to fix this in as timely a manner as possible to get people back on their feet. I mean, that's what we do here. We don't do handouts. We do hand ups. We do what it takes to get people on their feet and just get everybody, it'll never be completely normal again. Not at all. You can look at physically and see that, and in the hearts of people as well. But people pulled together well, and we're moving right along. It's not the way it used to be, but maybe that's not the point. We're just trying to build back better in every way possible.
And Sam, as you are working to reclaim Indigenous rights to subsistence farming, to fishing, to the traditional ways of life, how is Georgetown law shaping how you're showing up in this movement, in this effort?
I think when it comes to our subsistence and it comes to our hunting and fishing, um, there's a very important role that the law plays. We have an agreement through ANCSA with the U.S. government that says we're allowed to hunt and fish. And we have to be able to enforce that agreement in order for it to remain in effect. One of the key components of that is being able to uh, notify the government and sue the government when those rights are infringed. And so that's where I see law coming into it. Um, Beyond that, when it comes to our tribes and the ability to have sovereignty, you need to have economic sovereignty in order to really be sovereign. If you're going to the government every 6 or 8 months or every year and saying, hey, we need you to fund these things, we need you to do these things, then you're not truly independent and you're not truly sovereign. I think you saw that most recently with the Indian Health Service appropriation, where the government hadn't put through a spending bill, and so Indian Health Service was getting ready to run out of money, which means that healthcare in Indian country was no longer going to be existent. A lot of people think that a lot of people remember when the federal government shut down um, the last time, but few people know that it meant that Indian Health Service also shut down. And so, in order to be independent, you have to be economically independent. And one of the things that you need in order to have a strong, robust economy is a nation of laws, and being able to build tribal law in such a way as to provide economic opportunity for outside business and internal entrepreneurship is crucially important to that. We're not allowed to tax our reservations or our native allotments, and so we need to figure out how to generate revenue outside of taxation, and really being able to attract business through favorable legal conditions is one of the ways that needs to happen. And so that's really what I'm working on, and that plays a larger role within the whole sovereignty question and the ability of us to enforce our rights.
I'm also wondering, as you all are co-creators of the Citizen Power documentary initiative, I mean, you all are helping us engage with questions that I think we're all grappling with. All of us are struggling with in our own zip codes and contexts about what it means to be a citizen. What does freedom really entail? Um, how do we live in a pluralistic society and flourish? And how do we address injustices that are ages old and still with us today? So all of those things, those are really big questions that we all carry with us. Um, and I see you all through your essays, your work, um, not shying away from really digging in there. And so I just wonder how what is that spark that keeps you pursuing answers to these questions or keeps you engaging with them? Is it relationships and um, is it, well, I don't want to put words into your mouth. What is it that keeps you all going and working on these big issues?
In our native community, we have this idea of reciprocity. Our elders teach us our traditions so that we can hunt and fish. And in turn, we borrow those traditions from them and we use them to feed them. We use those traditions to hunt and fish for them and for our families. And then we pass them down to our children and they hold them. And then they do the same for us. And a part of that is ensuring that there's proper management of our resources, that access remains to those resources, namely fish and marine mammals, and land mammals as well. And so when it comes to our community, there's this traditional expectation of excellence. Where I come from, it gets down to 40 and 50 below zero in the wintertime. Failure is not an option. In our traditional society, if you failed, you died. And that carries through to this day. And so when it comes to ensuring that we keep our rights and that we keep our subsistence and we maintain our foods, there is no option to fail. There isn't an option to not work on it. And I always remember what one of my cousins wrote when it was Senator Murkowski who came out to the village schools and asked them what climate change means. This was probably about 7 years ago. And she came out and asked them all to write on a piece of paper, and these are second graders, and asked them, what does climate change mean to you? And one of my cousins wrote, when she was 6, she wrote, I'm worried there will be no ice and that we will have nothing to eat. And so when trying to achieve the goal of having a happy and healthy community, you need to think about what's our core needs. Our core needs are food, shelter, and water. We don't have clean water, but we should darn well keep our good food and our shelter, um, and work to get that clean water. And a part of that is kind of sitting in an uncomfortable position of always fighting for change, always fighting for more. I just remember one of my elders who would fish for salmon on the beach in the summertime, and we'd caught a bunch of fish and cleaned them. And I was a little kid; I was 7 or 8 years old, and we'd cleaned all these fish. And I said, "Well, I think we're done now." And my uncle looked down at me and said, "No, we're not done yet. There's always more." And so when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to working for our peoples, there's always more. You're never done. And so until you just have to keep working.
Jonathan, how about you? What has Sam shared that maybe sparked something for you, or what would you like to tell us about what it is that keeps you going?
Well, within Appalachia, at least since, major immigration to the area and introduction of the coal industry, there's always been a sense of survival. It was never really flourishing at all here, and can still be argued, that with the exception of a few major cities, nothing exceptional happened economically. And so, even though there has been generational improvement, which is something that we seek more and more, our great grandparents really, really struggled. My great grandfather hiked like 5 miles across the hill at 4 a.m. every morning to go to the coal mines, got home in the evening, tended to the garden, tended to the farm, got in bed and did the same thing again. It's not just an area code. That's something that many rural people have experienced. But Appalachia, especially, there's always been a sense of survival here. And I think moving generationally past that sense of survival to a way of sustainability in that of, furthering industry here, just modernizing, furthering education. There's just a sense of generational improvement. I think that's what we strive for here, is not having the same struggles that our parents and our grandparents and even some of us had. It's moving past that to a better quality of life, which we are doing quite well at this point.
I have one more question for y'all about hope and about what gives you hope. Um, we know that the stakes are high and the hills we climb are steep. And I wonder what it is that what do you see happening right now, either in your communities or in this country, that's giving you a sense of hope for the future, where we're flourishing and not just surviving, as Jonathan said.
I would say the hope here, at least that I've experienced, and this project has helped enhance that because it kind of, has pushed me to see it through a lens that's not my own in a way. And I think that what gives me hope is just seeing the desire for generational improvement, the desire for higher education within my peers. People pulled together, from as far as, Manila, Philippines to 5 minutes down the road, all seeking to stay in this area and better this area because they see just how unique it is and how, the stereotypes aren't true. It's not a bunch of dumb hillbillies, cynical people. It's people who have a lot of heart, and it's one big family. There's a lot of love in these mountains, and that's very obvious once you just come and stay a while. But I would say just seeing it in practice, just, taking a look at the process that I helped create here and just seeing the desire of people to improve themselves, to improve their families, to improve this region, and to stay here, not to run to Detroit or Cincinnati when there's no work, to build work here. It's just, I think I see that in myself, and I see that in my peers now that I've looked away, took a step back and looked at it from another situation, and I see it in the people.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is that push for generational improvement. But I think what really gives me hope from my community is the reality that our young people are interested. Our young people are no longer sitting down and just taking what's dished out to them. They're getting up and they're learning. They're working. They are organizing. And outside of our young people, we're finally seeing the situation in Alaska get to a point that um, is not good. With our natural resources, you're seeing the salmon runs that the people in the Yukon rely on being decimated, their fisheries being closed. But what is happening is that our tribes are coming together and having unity. They're having unity and working together on common issues. So that way, when we put all of our efforts into one thing and we speak with a single voice, we're always listened to. If we can be divided up, then you can divide us all up and we're not listened to. But things have gotten to the point where we're working together with each other. And, you know, that might look like something that is bad. But I'm just reminded of the words of an elder. Uh, when when thinking about Operation Fish Drop, we had a number of different calls about climate change and what it meant to communities across the state. And there was an old woman from an elder from Point Mary, or St. Mary's, or Point Hope. I can't remember which village, but she said, when I was a little girl, we were caribou people. We hunted caribou and we ate caribou. Uh, and she said, as I got older, those caribou moved further and further north until there were no caribou, and we were no longer caribou people. And then she said, but when they moved further to the north, moose came in from the south, and now we eat moose and we're moose people. If we had been too busy watching the caribou leave, we would have never seen the moose come in. And so I think that the changes that we're seeing and the shifts that we're having are our moose. And as long as we keep our eyes out for it, we won't miss it and we won't go hungry. Uh, we'll always be taken care of, and we'll always take care of ourselves. Uh, there is a resiliency that is in our communities. We walked across the ice bridge from Siberia, uh, killed woolly mammoths, and carved out our homes in some of the most inhospitable uh, environments on the planet. If you didn't know what you were doing, you died. And so when it comes to the challenges that sit in front of us, they're nothing to the ones that we've already faced. And so knowing that our traditions are our future allows us to be resilient even when things don't look that great. Because I'm sure that they've been worse, and I know that they've been worse. And so that's what gives me hope.
Thank you both for your wisdom and for sharing your love of your place with us in words and images. And I'm really excited about this event on January 19th. Before I let you go, one more question. I ask everyone on this podcast. It's one of my favorites because it is also revealing. I'm wondering what piece of media are you listening to right now, or watching, or taking in that is pumping you up, making you happy? Maybe it's something that you want to share with the rest of the country.
I think the most inspirational piece of media coming out right now is coming from Alice Glenn out of Alaska in her podcast Coffee and Quack, Quak, and that means frozen meat in Inupiaq. But I think really that captures what's going on in my community, in the state of Alaska and across Native country, especially in Alaska. And I think that she does a really wonderful job of portraying the realities of our rural communities.
That's great. Can we listen to it wherever podcasts are available, basically?
Yeah, I think so. I listen to it on Spotify, but I'm sure you can find it anywhere else.
Awesome.
Well, this is a little narrow, but there's really never a lot produced out of Appalachia. So I would say that something right now that really gives me hope for media coming out of the region, is this project that we've done, what we're working on. This is the most exposure that Eastern Kentucky's got since Stranger with a Camera. if you're familiar with that, and that was for locals killing a camera crew. I mean, this is the first bit of positive exposure that we've gotten in the region in a long time, and it's just I'm really glad to have been a part of that, to be a part of that.
It's wonderful. So next week is the Connecting Our Heartlands event, January 19th. It's a free virtual event that's aimed at rural leaders and advocates and the rural curious. It's aimed at anyone really who's thinking deeply about some of those questions about American democracy and how do we do this life together, and interrogating the idea of an American creed. Again, we'll have Eric Liu there, Daniel Allen, and David Kennedy, all incredible civic scholars, and they will join Sam and Jonathan and Jace, who was unable to join our conversation today, but all three will be engaged with these civic scholars. So I'm really looking forward to the event. Again, it's free, it's virtual. You can go to the Rural Assembly website to sign up. Sam and Jonathan, thank you so much for being here today. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
If you enjoyed Everywhere Radio, we'd love for you to consider subscribing to the General Rural Assembly newsletter, where we promote new offerings from the Assembly and amplify the good work of our many partners across the country. We also have an advocacy newsletter that comes to inboxes on Mondays to help you start each week with a quick take on the top issues that we're tracking across the nation. Everything from broadband policy to reproductive justice. Just head over to ruralassembly.org to sign up. If you're a true fan of Everywhere Radio, please let us know by rating us wherever you get your podcast. And if this isn't your cup of tea, no biggie, it's fine. We'd like to thank our media partner, the Daily Yonder. Everywhere Radio is a production of the Rural Assembly. Our senior producer is Joel Cohen, and our associate producers are Xander Brown and Teresa Collins. And Anya Slepkin is our assistant producer. And we're grateful for the love and support of the whole team at the Center for Rural Strategies. Love you, mean it. You can be anywhere, we'll be everywhere.